I retired with an 80-20 asset allocation and brought it down 5 ticks at a time until now I'm down to 65-35, and I'm figuring I'll probably go to 60-40 by the time I'm 75.
You're listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast, where you'll hear the stories and interviews of everyday millionaires. We'll unveil their decisions, their strategies, and their current portfolio allocation. Now to your hosts, Clark Sheffield and Jace Mattinson.
Welcome back, everybody. Episode 219, Millionaires Unveiled. It's Clark here with Jace. Jace, what's going on? How was your New Year's?
Man, New Year's was great, dude. I'm excited for 2022. How about you?
Yeah, I was just thinking, same here. I was just thinking New Year's resolution. So I did a quick search, New Year's resolution stats. I was kind of curious. So here's some fun stats I came across. It says baby boomers want to lose weight. 53% of them have the resolution to lose weight, but they have a less importance, but place less importance on saving money. 39% compared to younger generations. Gen Z is 4 times more concerned with finding love than any other age group. Millennials are the most confident. Imagine that. Millennials are the most confident that they'll keep all their resolutions. Losing weight is more important to those who live in the Midwest than any other region. Exercising is more important for those on the West Coast compared to the rest of the U.S. Southern states find it more important to drink less alcohol. The Northeast would like to stop drinking alcohol completely. So there you go. There's a couple of fun New Year's resolutions. So you probably made some and then already stopped, right? Just a few days in.
Yeah, most people kind of send those out the window, right? Within the first couple of weeks is typically what
day 3.
Yeah, it's typically the statistics, right? You gotta stick to it, or it becomes, I guess, a quote unquote resolution and not a goal, or I don't know. There's a lot of stuff, and we've gotten into some of our millionaires with this, but just in terms of the psychology of goal setting, and if you're setting them and how you track them, and how you hold yourself accountable, etc. But that's for another day.
One episode coming up this week. This is with JC. He is past the traditional retirement age. He is 70 years old, so definitely one of our more seasoned guests. He started his career in the military, served in a couple different branches. He was a bartender in a couple various states after the military, then moved on to electronics and worked at a few various tech companies. Net worth of $2.2 million currently, made 90% of his wealth after he was 50. So kind of fun to hear from somebody a little bit older, one of the few that we've had, right? Jace, kind of fun to look back and hear those perspectives. So last week we had Sal, guest interview, where we got into a few different topics: high net worth individuals, how they invest, managing generational wealth. So fun to hear a different perspective from him. So Happy New Year's to everybody. Hope everybody has a great year. If you'd like to ask a question to us or some of the millionaires on the show, go to our website, millionairesunveiled.com. Hit Ask a Millionaire, and you can either type one into us or record one via SpeakPipe, and we'll play it on the show. So please ask a question if you have any. And without any further delay, let's get right into today's episode with JC.
JC, do you want to give us a little bit about your background and what you're up to now?
I've bounced around the country all of my life, all of my adult life. I spent the first part of my career in the military. I did the Air Force during Nam. I never left the States, so nobody was shooting at me. I did 3 years and 9 months in the Air Force. Got an early discharge because Nam was winding down. Then I did 3 years and 9 months in the inactive reserves. And then I couldn't find a job that paid well enough, so I went back in the service and I joined the Navy this time. And after 3 years and 9 months, I got out of there because they had a program where if you were going to attend college, they would let you out a little early to catch the beginning of the semester. So another 3 year and 9 months hitch. After 2 tours in the service, I figured out that's not for me. So I've also bounced around the country: New York, Michigan, Wisconsin, California, Illinois, and Florida, tending bar. Supported myself tending bar for a while. And the Navy, though, taught me electronics. Air Force taught me how to type, but the Navy taught me electronics. So I ended up in the electronics field. That college I told you the Navy let me out for, it was a Foothill Community College here in California, or out in California. I took the advanced electronics course, got an AA degree in it, and I started getting jobs working in the field. Many startups. At one point, I ended up at SGI, that was Silicon Graphics. They're gone now. I think they got bought and dissolved or something. Eventually, I ended up at Apple, and my last 10 years working were at Apple. And it was at Apple that my net worth really started to climb. Although I did recently discover a 3x5 note card that had handwritten a net worth statement on. And at that time, it turns out I was worth $250,000 in December of 2001. That's when I really started buckling down and realizing that, hey, I could do this. So I started putting money away, 401k plans and such. That's about as much background as I can think of right now. You got any questions?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So, I, just for our listeners, so we provide some context. I mean, this is an interview that Clark, if the right word is, we just haven't had as many of these. But essentially, you're retired. Is that correct?
Since this January of 2008, right before the financial crisis, my portfolio dropped from 1.51 million to 864,000. The end of February of 2009.
Wow, so losing half your wealth.
2008, almost. Very close.
And so 250 in 01, you went to 15 in 08. What was and we'll get into your net worth today, but how did you build that up so quickly from 01, from 250 to 15 in 08, and then decided to retire?
Let's see, 250, it went to 388, to 469, to 824. To a buck and a quarter, $1,020,250. I mean, that was in December of 2005. So I've got the end of every year net worth on my screen here. I don't remember, other than throwing money into companies' 401k plans. That's probably where the bulk of it was. That and the house was gaining in value. I was out in California at the time. My wife and I bought the house for $185, something like that. $135, she says. And we sold it when I retired to hit the road for $730.
Wow, that's pretty big
Yeah,
gain.
the house, that one purchase of one piece of real estate was a big chunk.
So, JC, what is your net worth today?
Today, I'd happen to have that on the screen too. It's $1,985,713. I'm sorry, that's the portfolio. The portfolio and the net worth are separate calculations, but the portfolio is in the net worth. The net worth is actually $2,216,784. $2.2 million.
So just shy of 2.3. Portfolio is 1.9. So you recovered from that 2008, 2009 blip.
By the end of 2009, we were back over $1 million.
So during that time, did you reduce your living expenses at all, or did you continue to just have faith in the market to rebound?
I was watching our burn rate, how fast we were going through what we had. And I realized we couldn't keep that pace up at $864,000 left. So we got what we call in the lifestyle, the RV full-time lifestyle, we call it work camping. We got a work camping job at the Crazy Horse Monument in South Dakota. My wife took care of the office, checking in new RVers coming in to visit campers. And I mowed the grass, cleaned the cottages, and spent half my time as a greeter over at the Crazy Horse Monument Visitor Center. I split my time between the two, and she worked in the office. $8 an hour, but we got free site and weren't moving, not driving anywhere, so no diesel. And I had budgeted $600 a month on diesel and $400 a month for RV sites. So that saved us $1,000 a month. Plus we were taking in money. Plus we got to eat at their cafeteria. So yeah, we trimmed our sails a bit there for a while.
Interesting.
But by the end of the summer, we had already recovered back up to $1 million. So we never had to work again.
Gotcha. So you retired. Let's just throw it out there for our listeners, if you don't mind, and we can edit this later if you want. But you retired in your late 50s.
57.
57. And obviously that was in 08-ish
Right.
time frame. So
I was 57 in November of 07.
okay, so was that the plan? Was it to retire at 57, or did your portfolio get to a point where you decided to retire?
I saw that money, and then it just hit me. Let me back up a bit. That last 10 years of my career was probably my best 10 years. Just not only just financially, but just the joy of the job. I used to tell my coworkers that I loved what I was doing so much, I'd pay them to let me do it, and I was good at it. But as the years rolled on, new skill sets came along. and new languages to be learned, and new ways of doing things, and younger kids. We'd hire young guys. I call it young, in their 30s. And I didn't keep up my skill set. I never lost my ability that I had developed, but I didn't improve it anymore after I had 6 or 7 years on the job. And I could see the handwriting on the wall that I wasn't going to be able to keep that going much longer. So once I saw how large our balance was, I came home one day and I asked my wife, I said, what'd you think about me retiring and hitting the road in our motorhome? We had an older motorhome out in the front yard. And she said, her eyes got big as saucers. She said, I'd love that. Travel the whole country, but we're going to have to get a different motorhome. I thought we'd go when we had it was fine. But she wanted us to get a better one. And she was right. And we ended up with a really nice high-end motorhome, 40-footer diesel pusher instead of 32-foot gas rig. So we've been quite happy in it. And we've been.
How much does a new motorhome cost?
New, it was probably close to $300, but we bought it used, 4,600 miles on it. Whoever bought it told them that they wanted something smaller to go off-road in, so they gave it up after months. It was an 06, and we bought it in the middle of 07, and it cost us $200 and the trade-in of my old rig, which I wanted $50 for. They offered me $30 for it, but they lowered the price. They were asking for this rig down to $200 plus my trade-in, so I didn't care if they gave me $30,000 or $50,000. Out of my pocket, it was only $200. So that's what we paid for the rig, and we got a lease for it. But then we split the house up for sale, and within a month and a half, we sold it. I turned around and paid the rig off. So we hit the road completely debt-free.
And that's when you sold the house.
Yeah, and the house went. We took out a $30,000 HELOC. Is that what it's called? Home equity line of credit, and used that $30,000 to fix a chimney in the fireplace that had been damaged in the earthquake. I think it was 98. We had that big earthquake out there, and we resurfaced all the floors, and put a new roof, fixed the landscaping somewhat to get the price up to an asking price of $735 or $738, and we settled for $730.
Wow, that's amazing.
And we paid $135 for it, $138.
And how many years did you say you owned it?
God, do you remember when we bought that? Probably 12 to 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah, 15 years probably.
Wow, that's amazing.
Real estate prices in California got ridiculous.
Yeah, and even more so this year, right?
I don't know. We've been gone for 14 years.
Yeah, I think they're up another 15 or something percent. But I think because of COVID, they're up another 15% or something.
Wow, I would think people would be wanting to leave there.
Yeah, they are. They are. They're California and Jason's Texas. That's what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, then why would the real estate prices be going up in California?
That's one thing I have not figured out because
that's puzzling, isn't it?
I think it's just the state just still has millions and millions of people.
So, JC, I want to come back to your story a little bit, but first, let's break down this 2.2 million. So maybe just let's go big buckets here, because I know you sent a screenshot, which is awesome, of your net worth and your allocation a little bit. But how much of the 2.2 is in retirement, specific retirement accounts?
518, it looks like. Wait a minute, the Roth is part of that too.
Yeah, and you got the Roth, so like 600-ish, call it?
Get close to that, 580 maybe, 590, somewhere around there. Is tax sheltered.
Okay, and then just in the market, that's kind of the chunk of it, right? Like 1.2 million if you count the Apple stock?
Yeah, 1.3.
1.3, and then you got the motorhome, and then what other property real estate do you have?
Well, a couple of years ago, I think it's only 2 now. Are you guys familiar with Paul Merriman?
I'm not.
He's a financial blogger. He used to run his own investment firm, and he sold it, and now he teaches, runs a blog and a podcast. Anyway, one day he mentioned on his podcast that he had bought a place down in Mexico and referenced his blog. So I went to the blog, found all the links for it. I was blown away. It was beautiful. So I sent the links to my wife, and I said, look at this. We should think about going down there next year. She had us booked on a plane in 3 weeks. And so we flew down to Mexico just to look around. Within 6 days, we made an offer on a townhouse down there and bought it. So that's one of the things that's on the spreadsheet. It says Carolina 59. That 180,000 is what we paid for the place, including closing costs, for 2,500 square feet, 3-bedroom, 3.5 bath, 2 stories, on a hill overlooking the gorgeous UNESCO heritage site downtown, which is 0.9 miles away.
So do you still use that a lot? Do you go out there, or do you rent it out?
I think we've been down there 3 or 4 times we've been down there, but not since COVID hit. We haven't gone. And we're itching to get back.
Yeah. Yeah. And then let's go through this cash here just for our listeners. He's got Wells Fargo, cash, Vanguard, money market, and even the piggy bank is making it on here.
And I also had the Walmart gift card. Now, there's logic behind the gift card. We live in a motorhome. It's a diesel pusher, and it's a 110-gallon tank. And every 400 miles, I got to fill it up, usually in the neighborhood of 60 to 65 gallons. But if I have a Walmart gift card, I can go to their associated gas station called Murphy's usually and get 15 cents off a gallon. So I usually keep $300 or $400 in that gift card. We're sitting for a month now, not driving, so I haven't bothered to fill it back up. That's why it's only $5. But normally there's $400 or $500. And then the piggy bank had 50 or 60 bucks in it, not the 4 it says now. But I was in a Walmart and heard them discussing amongst themselves, the cashiers, that they're running out of coins. This is back in the day where there was a serious coin shortage in the entire economy because either people were hoarding them or the government wasn't putting them out or people didn't want to touch them so they wouldn't bring them anymore to the store. The point being, the cashiers were hurting for coins. So I asked them if they could use my $50 piggy bank coins. They said, sure, bring it in. We won't charge you. Because normally they charge you to cash in your coins. They got a machine back there and they take their percentage, but they let me not pay the percentage because I was bringing in coins for their benefit. They did give me the bills, though, the money. So I got my $50 and they got their $50 for the coins. And we built that piggy bank back up to $4. But that's why it's on the spreadsheet. Oh, also another reason why everything's on the spreadsheet, the balance sheet, is because we use YNAB as our budgeting tool. And they have an off-budget section where you can put retirement accounts, house, all that kind of stuff, and it doesn't figure in on the budget. But because the piggy bank comes out of the cash money that I have on me, I have to account for where the money went out of the cash account. So it ends up being a transfer from cash to piggy bank. Because the piggy bank is in YNAB, I put it on the budget too because I wanted the two of them to be as close as possible. Same amount.
And what's the tool you use? Tell our listeners, what's the tool you use to track all this?
YNAB. You need a budget.
No, the spreadsheet that you sent us, this old school program.
That's called Spreadsheet Calculator, but it's like, I'm probably getting up to 25, 30 years old. I used it back in the days before computers had mice, before there was a mouse. This computer, you move around with the keys J, K, L, and H. It's how you move back and forth and up and down with those letters. It's a text-based spreadsheet program. But it doesn't make mistakes, so I'm happy with it.
And then let me just share for our listeners of the money that you have in the stocks. You have, it seems like about 40% or so, about $670 grand in Vanguard 500 index, extended market funds. So you seem to be mostly invested in index funds.
Oh, totally. Except for the Apple stock and the Saunders stock. And the peer-to-peer lending. I got a little bit left in there. But I want to back up a bit to the S&P 500 and the extended market. That was a market timing move I kind of made when the financial crisis of 08, 09 started to rebound. I talked to my financial advisor at the time, and I suggested to him that I was under the impression, or I had the opinion, that I thought the S&P would recover faster than the total stock market, which is where all my money was. And he didn't argue against it. He said, that makes sense. So I moved everything out of the total stock market and put it in the S&P 500. But that worked. That was a good guess. It paid off. But I didn't know about market timing was a bad thing to do back then. I would never make that move again today. But I did back then, and because I moved that money, I had acquired so much capital gains, I couldn't move it back without realizing the capital gains, because this all happened in my taxable account. Taxable brokerage account. So I called Vanguard and looking for, what do I do about this? He said, well, there's the extended market will pick up everything that isn't in the S&P 500. Between the two of them, you practically have the total stock market. So I started moving money in there over time. I really can't even remember where that money came from. At one point in time, I got a $30,000 refund check from the state of California because I had to pay them when I sold a bunch of my Apple shares when I retired and finally established a residency in South Dakota. So they had to give me back that money. Side story, I had it sent general delivery to a post office in a town we were in, and then we went to get it, and the post office had a chain link fence around the entire thing, was under renovations. So I didn't know where my $30,000 check went. We hunted it down. They moved general delivery to another post office. We found it and got it. So that might have been part of that money that salted the extended market fund. I can't really say where the rest of it came from because it's all.
Yeah. So
it could just be growth because I did that back in 2010 probably.
Right. So what's the story with the 150-ish in Apple stock? Is that you had options there when you started?
I had grants for performance and for a bribe to get me to come to Apple. When they bought a startup that I was working for, they gave me the equivalent I had 10,000 shares or something like that at that little startup. So they gave me a whole bunch of shares to come to Apple. And then I got a couple of performance bonuses in the form of stock, grants, stuff like that. And then there was an employee stock purchase plan that I participated in to the max. At one time, I had 10,000 shares of Apple, pre-7-for-1 split, pre this recent 4-for-1 split. But most of that's gone now. Before this most recent split, I was down to my last 300 shares. But now that pushed me back up to 1,200, and I just sold 200, so I still got 1,000 shares left of Apple stock after this final split, this most recent split. So that's where that's from. It's leftover. I call it leftover Apple stock.
JC, have you been selling that ever since you left there?
You know, there's another interesting thing about how I decided to pull my money out of my accounts. During the 08, 09 crisis, we lived off of a laddered CD structure that I had set up, not knowing I was going to need it, but an advisor I was using at the time at Wells Fargo suggested it. So I had like 10 or 11 $10,000 CDs, and they were maturing every 3 months. One of them would come up for maturity. So we lived on that during the crisis. I never did have to draw anything out of investments. And once the CDs were gone, I didn't know what the smartest thing to do was, so I decided to do a round robin. I'll sell Apple shares, and I'll take some out of the taxable account, and then I'll take some out of the IRA, and then I'll go back to the Apple shares. Well, I did that for one cycle, but then didn't want to take any more out of the IRA. I learned that it was better to live off the taxable account and let the IRA sit. So I bounced back and forth between the Apple and the Apple and the brokerage account. And then after Steve Jobs died, I gave it about a year, and then I got the feeling that there wasn't going to be anything wonderful coming out of Apple anymore. They're going to be all right. They'll make a lot of money, but they're not a growth company, in my opinion, anymore. So I decided to just live on the Apple shares until they were gone.
Interesting.
And pretty much did that, except for the few times when I found that I needed to rebalance. Most of the time I tried to accomplish that in tax-sheltered accounts, but when there wasn't enough equities in the tax-sheltered accounts to rebalance, I'd have to do some of it in the taxable account to get back to my asset. I retired with an 80-20 asset allocation and brought it down 5 ticks at a time until now I'm down to 65-35, and I'm figuring I'll probably go to 60-40 by the time I'm 75, 5 years from now. Because I just went to 65-35 last year.
Okay, let's take a quick break from the episode and thank Wix for sponsoring today's show. Whether you're starting a new business, you need a personal blog or website, Wix can help you do that for as little as $2.95 a month. So take your business online with Wix, the leading website creation platform that's got all the tools you need to create, manage, and grow your brand. Whether you're starting your online business or you've got a side hustle, you can design a site to showcase your brand that'll look great on any device. So join over 200 million people already using Wix's wide range of solutions to enhance their business. Plus, with enterprise-grade security built into every site, you know you're in safe hands. You can manage everything from one dashboard on desktop and mobile, so you can be available anywhere at any time, in the office, at home, or on the go. Want to get started with your website? Head over to Wix.com and create your website today. And without any further delay, let's get back into the episode.
JC, let me ask. I mean, it's interesting that you're still so heavily weighted in stocks. It's somebody your age.
You think that's heavy? 65, 35?
I personally don't, but traditional advice might tell you that it is.
I'm being a wimp.
No, I don't. But traditional advice, the traditional advice tells you as you move into retirement, 65 plus, let's just call it, you need to get more bonds, more heavy into bonds than stocks.
I did make a move recently in that Social Security. We pulled the trigger on Social Security a couple years back, and that now covers half of our living expenses. We budget 65, probably spend 7,500 a month. Social Security is covering almost half of that. And next year, when my wife turns 70, it'll cover half of it because she's getting $900 more next July when she turns 70. So once I realized that I don't need 5 or 6% of my portfolio anymore, I'm actually now down to less than 2.5% my withdrawal rate on my portfolio. So I moved a lot of the bonds into tips because I'm looking for safety with bonds, not looking for growth, not looking for gains, looking for safety. So I moved I got out of any corporates I might have been in before because they can suffer during a major downturn where government bonds won't suffer as much. I feel safer in government bonds, and I feel even safer in tips because I get some protection from any potential future inflation. So that's why the tips is so high, 410,000.
Interesting.
Like that's that risky for me because even if I lost everything that's in equities, I've got enough money in bonds to support the rest of our life. With Social Security, the bonds would support me for the rest of my life. So I'm not scared of the equity portion of my portfolio.
Sorry, Jay, does that make you want to spend more then?
Well, I'm tempering myself. For a while, thanks to Paul Merriman's recommendations, was in small cap value fund, and I had a REIT fund for a while. But once I realized that I don't need the portfolio anymore to live, I cut out the REITs, I cut out the small cap value, and I used those funds from the monies from those funds to go into the tips to help me drop down to 65-35 from the 70-30 that I was previously. That helped me get down to 65-35, getting rid of REITs and the small cap value fund because I don't really need to take that much risk anymore.
Yeah, totally. So, JC, I'm curious, does life expectancy for somebody your age play into how you invest or how you think about the world as you withdraw your portfolio? I mean, are you planning to live to 100 plus, or how do you think about that as you've moved into retirement?
My wife and I have had this conversation, and I brought it up recently when I saw 70 coming around the corner, and I said to her, we probably only got about 10 years left to do whatever we want. Go where once we hit 80, things are going to change. Be lucky if we're vertical. Both my parents only lived to their mid-80s. Her mom she's in her mid to late 80s. I think she's going to be 88 or is 88, somewhere around there. But 90 would be fortunate, I think, if we got that far. So we're looking at 20 years tops. And the next 10, we plan to be as active as we possibly can. Did you hear that?
Yeah, repeat it again so our listeners can hear.
My wife said, travel, travel, travel. So we got some cruises queued up when COVID lets us go.
So 10 years in your mind to do whatever you want to do, but then you potentially could live for another 10 years and you still could be spending money, right? Like those years. But does the way you invest now change at all because of that kind of timeline for yourself?
I don't think I'll ever go below 60-40, but I think I will go to 60-40 by the time I'm 75 because I just don't need all that risk.
Yeah, totally.
And the 5 points that comes off the equities will go into bonds where they should be safe. Government tips.
Totally. So, JC, I want to ask, because it's pretty remarkable, much like Warren Buffett, you've made majority of your wealth after your 50th birthday, correct?
Wasn't that wild? I just came to that realization when I found that 3x5 card recently.
Yeah, totally. So maybe for our listeners, just give some context. Like, what was it like in your 20s, 30s, and 40s? Not that you were reckless or anything, but you just definitely did not build the wealth in that in that decade for yourself. You did it in your 50s.
Right. Before I got out of the Navy, and I think you can see how old, but I was around probably close to 28 when I got out of the Navy. And those first 8 years, I made piddly. Starvation wages, hourly. Well, I've always been a W-2 employee, low wages person. And that's why I ended up going in the Air Force and the Navy, was to get a steady job that paid halfway decent, put a roof over my head. Because I was not a college graduate. I was just a flunky high school graduate. I had a pretty low GPA in high school. So I never got a really good job until I got out of the Navy and worked in the electronics field. And then my salary started climbing. And when it got to be more than I could spend, then I started setting it aside. And it's all been, almost all, has been 401k. Although, for a while, a couple of years, up until December of '07, I think it was, I was trying to be a stock picker. And at one point, I had over 25 different companies and a total investment of about $65,000. And then I did a spreadsheet on everything, see where it was all ever underwater. Oh, that was '08. That's right, because in the middle of the financial crisis, December of '08, every holding I had was underwater. So I dumped it all and got $34,000 out of my $65,000 back. And I took that money and put it in index funds. Or maybe I used it to buy CDs. I really don't. But
So
yeah,
what's
I quit
been-
trying to be a stock picker. I'm no good at it.
Yeah. No, as I hear your story, and you mentioned you didn't go to college, right? Obviously, you were in the Air Force and the Navy. You mentioned that.
The Navy let me out 3 months early so I could go to college. So I went to a junior college and got an AA in electronics. And I think that helped me job hunting. Although I didn't do much job hunting. Once I got my first really good job, I got recruited to every one of my following jobs. No, I wasn't chicken.
That's your wife calling you chicken in the background?
Jobs, and sometimes I'd take it, sometimes I wouldn't.
So you're married now. Do you have any kids?
We don't. This on a personal note, this is both of our fourth marriage, but it's our third and fourth marriage were to each other. So we were married for maybe 10 years, and then we got divorced, didn't see each other for a dozen years. And then she called me up looking for a little help. And so I invited her to come back home, because I never left the house. She left. So I invited her to come back home. And after a couple of years, decided to get married again. That was December 1st of 2007. So we're on our second marriage. It's like 13 years this second time. But we didn't have any kids together. I had kids in a prior marriage before her and I ever met.
Yeah, because you have a few 529 accounts listed. What do you plan to do with those?
I don't know how this works. I just think, given how much money I have, and my kids were estranged from me until they were adults because their parent didn't want to have anything to do with me. So when they were in their late 20s, early 30s, one of them reached out to me, and then the other one went along with it. Now we're close again. So they both have kids. And so now I have 3 grandkids, 2 by one and 1 by the other. So I started putting money aside in their 529s. I opened them up with $15,000. I put $6,000 in one, 5 in another, and 4 in another because of their ages. The youngest one got the smallest 529. And then I've been dumping $1,000 in each one of their accounts every year ever since. And I don't know how they get to use that money. We'll have to learn about that when the time comes.
Yeah, you can pass that down to the grandkids.
They're 8, 7, and 4, something like that. They're single-digit kids still.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. So as you look back, JC, on this whole journey, and now
I have lived a dozen lifetimes.
There you go.
Ways of living, I've lived a dozen times.
What's your advice to somebody? How did you do this? I mean, you're worth 2.2. You moved around jobs. You had the Army and the Air Force. You just invested. I mean, what's your advice to somebody?
My wife just said, don't do all that stuff. Financially, I was late to the FIRE movement, but I'm a hardcore believer now. I didn't know I was a FIRE member until I learned about FIRE after being on the road for 4 or 5 years, maybe half a dozen years. I learned about the FIRE movement, and I'm a strong believer in it. It has evolved since I've learned about it. They're more encouraging of side jobs, dabbling in real estate, entrepreneurship, and all that. But to me, I just look at all those as jobs. I don't want a job. I love passive income. So all of my investing has been in the stock market with index funds. And I was in all index funds before I ever learned about the FIRE.
Let me ask on your retirement. You retired with 1.5. And then you mentioned it went back to about 864 when the market dipped at the end of 2009 or mid 2009 or February of 2009, I think, right? You said, yeah. Was 1.5 enough to retire, knowing that could happen again at some point, or do you wish you would have kept working a few more years?
Not knowing about the fire movement and the 4% rule, 25 times your living expenses, all that. I did a side-by-side spreadsheet of current expenses and anticipated expenses being on the road. By then, we knew we'd have the RV and it would be paid for. So my current living expenses were just a little north of $65,000. I was making $135,000, so 50% savings rate. But $65,000 was my current living expenses, and I thought my on-the-road living expenses were going to be $25,000 to $28,000. The first year out, it was $80,000. I didn't know, but by then we pulled the trigger. We sold the house. We hit the road. There was no going back. So, but I thought that the $1.5 million would be what I would draw from, like a savings account, and I figured it would last me 20 years before I exhausted it. I had no idea of the recoverability of it till I experienced it. Once we lost that dropped down to 8.64. I'm saying that wrong. Once we dropped down to 864,000, that was nerve-wracking. That's why we work camped. I thought, well, we're going to just have to learn to spend less. But man, by the end of that summer, we're back up over $1 million. I just loosened the purse strings again, and we started spending 80, 90, 100,000 a year again. And we've been fortunate. You know, that big long bull run, I was right in the middle of it. And
yeah.
Normal 10 years, I don't think we'd have spent as much. But every year, I compare what we started the year with, how much we spent, and what we ended up with at the end of the year. And I says, well, we're doing fine. We can keep spending like we've been doing. And we did. We spent $1.25 million. 1.255 we have spent on the road since we left with 1.5. And today we have 1.99 million. So yeah, the market's been good to us. Budget, yeah, but it doesn't constrain us. It just records it and makes sure I got enough. If we had to, we could drop down to just spend the budget. What's 6,000 times 12? 72,000 a year. We could get by on that if we had to. We decked out this rig with solar panels and lithium-ion batteries, and we can go 2 weeks without dumping or taking out water. So we could go park for free out in the desert, put it down with a rig twice a month, and
if you really had
we get fresh water and dump our tanks.
Yeah. What else? Let's talk retirement, JC. What else has surprised you? You mentioned the spending. Maybe you spent more than you initially thought you were. Anything else that surprised you since you retired 12 years ago?
The portfolio has surprised me. I never imagined it would make me that much money. For a little history, in 17, we lost $250,000. In 18, we made $300,000. Oh, I got that wrong. In 18, we lost $250,000. In 19, we made $300,000, and last year we made $350,000 after living expenses. Oh my God! I'm amazed, I'm blown away by the market. Its performance. It's just been awesome.
So Jace asked this a little bit, but as you start thinking about after having been retired, and how much do you think about what to do with this money? Are you going to leave it to your kids? Are you going to give it away? Are you going to try and spend most of it? What's your plan there on generational wealth?
I'm not a big fan of passing down millions and turning out lazy kids that are broke before they become 40 years old. Both my kids are doing well. They're making good money. They're living in nice houses. I don't think they're living as frugally or investing as good as they could, but they're doing fine. They all have positive net worths. And they all have retirement investments. They're doing good. But so I'm probably going to drop. Right now, I think the will says $200,000 each, but I might bump that up to $250,000 each. And I'm even dabbling, thinking about when we get really down the road, where I'm sure that we're going to have enough money to make it all the way, that I might even consider paying off the mortgages or something like that. But we'll see. I'm not going to give them any money now because we want to go on cruises and who knows what medical things could come up. So I like sitting on the $2 million, and it gives me a comfort factor.
Do people know you have that kind of money?
I don't keep it a secret. As a matter of fact, when I hit $2 million, I think I made half a dozen phone calls telling people.
Anybody treat you differently because of it?
I don't think so. What do you think? Nah, my wife says, nah. They always know that I had money. They didn't know how much maybe, but they always knew we had money.
Yeah.
I retired at 57 and bought a $250,000 motorhome and hit the road. They knew we had money.
Yeah, that's true. There's your most expensive car purchase. I don't have to ask you that question.
Really?
Let me just close here with a couple of rapid fire, and then we'll just end with some general mistakes or advice. So I'll skip the most expensive car. What about the most expensive meal out that you've personally paid for?
I'm thinking 600 maybe with a bunch of people that I picked up the tab.
All right, that's pretty good. What?
Just the wife and I, we don't spend 100.
Yeah. What item or items are worth spending more money on to you? Or I assume for you that's experiences.
Well, I'm just loving my e-bike. I'm on my third electric bike. Some years back, we gave up our bikes because I was getting too old to make the hills. But now we've got these electric bikes, and I'm loving it. So this is my third one. It costs $1,500 a piece.
Good for you. Good for you. Have you ever used a financial advisor?
I did a side-by-side comparison at one point when I was trying to figure out what to do with all this money I've got, because I'm making twice what I needed. And I had more than, I was topped out with the catch-up in the 401k for people over 50. Okay, so that limited me. I couldn't do any more of that. So I didn't know what to do with the rest of this money. So I went to the Wells Fargo and talked to the brokerage house down there. The Wells Fargo financial advisor, I think they call him, something like that. And I gave him half my money, and the other half I put in Vanguard. And I compared the two side by side for a couple of years. And that guy put me in illiquid REIT, for example. One of the things he got me into. There's a couple others, and but he did advise me on that laddered CD, and I think that saved us through the financial crisis because we didn't have to touch our portfolio. We didn't sell any out of it. I did, like I said earlier, get out of the total stock market and moved it all into the S&P 500 because I thought I was so smart. The S&P 500 was going to recover faster. I just got lucky.
How old were you when you became a millionaire?
That would have been, I was $824,000 at the end of 04 and $1.25 million at the end of 05. That was net worth. I'm not portfolio. That was net worth, so I'm sure the house was in there too.
Okay, so that's 55-ish?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would have just been 55 by a month before the end.
And then what's been your range of household income since you started working? Or since you had your first full-time job?
I can tell you exactly that. If you go to the Social Security website, you can find a place where they have your salary for your entire life, both Social Security earnings and Medicare earnings. Now, the difference is Social Security caps over the years, So it stops recording how much money you're really making once you hit the Social Security cap. So you just move over to the next column, which is the Medicare earnings, because it's not capped. And so I could see everything from $970 I made the first year it was ever recorded to the $680,000 I made the year before I quit because I started dumping my Apple stock, pay off stuff, invest in the market and stuff. So yeah.
So what was your highest salary ever?
Highest salary was $135.
That's good income.
Yeah, it's decent. And that was only 3 years I made over 100. Yeah. Here's a quick little side story again because of the money thing. They promoted me to run the department, and I hated the job. I liked fixing things, coming up with solutions, solving people's problems. I didn't like dealing with people that worked for me. So after 3 months on the job, I said, I don't like this. I want to go back to what I was doing. They said, well, you know anybody? Do it. And I said, yeah, my old boss from Silicon Graphics. So I called her up. I said, Debbie, what are you doing these days? It's all right. I said, well, how'd you like to come work for Apple? So I brought her in. They interviewed her. They loved her. They hired her. And she was my boss for the rest of the time I was there. She kept jacking up my salary every year. It was awesome.
There you go. So, JC, just in closing here, I know we've hit on a lot, and I appreciate your candor and your willingness to share your story, but just in closing, any mistakes that you made or any final advice that you would give?
I consider that stock picking thing that I went on for a couple of years stupid. I've learned better. I would never do such a stupid thing before. What do I know about companies? 1099 or 10, whatever it is they turn into the SEC. See, I don't even know the number. That 12B1, is that? No, that's an advertising fee. I can't remember what they're called, but the companies have to report to the SEC the truth of their business operations. I never read a single one of those. And so I was a stupid stock picker.
Well, you've done well. And thanks for coming on. I mean, obviously an amazing story. So
because I moved over to index funds. Everybody, listen to this. Low-cost, widely diversified index funds is the answer. My answer, anyway.
There you go. Well, JC, thanks so much for coming on. Net worth over $2 million, about 2.2, almost 2.3. Thanks for coming on tonight. Thanks for sharing your story. Really appreciate it.
It's been fun. Thank you.
Thanks, JC.
Thanks for listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast with Clark Sheffield and Chase Mattinson. For more stories, investment opportunities, and information, check out our website at millionairesunveiled.com. See you next time when you'll hear from another everyday millionaire.